I want to welcome everyone to the legislative wrap-up session of the 55th first session of the 55th legislative session. Again, we have with us, and I'm pleased to have with us Senator A.J. Griffin, also Representative John Pfeiffer, and Representative Dennis Casey. And the legislature is done, and we're seeing some of the fruits of what they're doing, and so why don't we start with a general overview of what you all thought of the session. AJ.
Well, this was my third full session, fourth session in, so it was a little different experience, and serving on the leadership team certainly means you are behind the scenes more than it might have been early on in my career, but it was a good session. I'll give us a B-, C+ on several things. But in the areas that I work in, we get high marks in the area of families and children, Health and Human Services Committee, and our Sub-Appropriations Committee fared very well during the session. We were able to accomplish a lot of our goals, and personally I was able to accomplish a lot of my personal goals. A couple of key flagship issues was a bill that I sponsored that adds a definition of failure to protect into the
You got the 8-year plan and you got the 5-year plan, got the different plans in place, and they haven't wanted to touch them, but probably pensions as big as nothing. I mean, just take teachers' retirement alone, it's almost $300 million. $300 million off the top. And you go, well, that's the money the teachers pay in, and in school districts, no, it's not. That's an additional 300. It's about 900 million a year just for that area. So, you know, it's very educational, and the hard thing about the whole process is that usually when there's a piece of legislation or there's an issue, if you have the opportunity to touch and talk to everybody and you explain to them, they go, okay, I see now. I don't agree with it, but I see now. And it's just difficult to do that, and that's the reason we have our form of government where there's representation, and it's not about just trusting us, because the phone calls and the emails obviously help, but you know, we're armed with a lot of information to make our decisions, and even at that, sometimes we don't make good decisions.
There's some discussions now that perhaps this year you were kind of grabbing the low-lying fruit, taking money out of revolving funds and all that was there, and millions of dollars here and millions of dollars there, and next year they're already talking about potentially $1 billion shortfall, or less now. I think there's the oil prices start coming back up.
I know. I was in a meeting with it dealt with ASEM, which is the Oklahoma School of Math and Science, and there was a group of people in that meeting, and to say that this group of people weren't wealthy, they were extremely wealthy people, and they were obviously loved the school, and they even write checks to the school, and they wanted to make sure it wasn't going to get cut. And the question was asked to one of the gentlemen that's highly successful that a lot of people would recognize, and he said he believes that it will be a soft landing. And then my colleague beside me, Dr. Cox, he said, yeah, like they'd know that. If they knew that, they'd be billionaires. And he goes, oh, wait. so I don't know. That's the thing that's really frustrating that I've actually had the opportunity to learn is how can they miss it? How do they miss it? Because it makes it so difficult, and there's just not an exact science on how people decide to spend their money from month to month.
And it's not only that, but prioritizing the state. One of the biggest surprises to me my first year was how much matching dollars the federal government's able to give to us. And so, you know, when people say, well, you're not cutting this and you're taking this low-hanging fruit, as you say, we're doing that so we can get matching dollars from the federal government to continue to make things better. You know, one of the really great examples is something that Congressman Lucas did in couple with the Farm Bill that flows money through the conservation services to help repair a lot of flood control dams and stuff like that. Federal dollars that have to be matched with state dollars. So sometimes when you're taking money out of these revolving funds, it's because they're needed to match with federal dollars to make repairs that we have to make right now. It's not a perfect system, but it's something that we have to do, or we lose those dollars forever.
There's been discussion about doing the budget one year, legislation the next year. How do you all feel about that?
Well, I think we learned a lot. We were discussing that at the beginning of the year and making that change. You know, it's something we don't need to change statute, and we certainly don't need to change our Constitution in order to do it. We could do it with our joint rules between the House and Senate. But we've also learned a little bit about we're not sure what next year will look like. And although we may be able to do a budget, it would be based on our best guess. And that may or may not work. It's something I know we'll continue the conversations. But once we got rolling with the session and we were consumed with writing a budget, we stopped talking about it for a while. It's something that's still there on the table. If we do it, I hope we attempt it in a temporary manner and not try to move forward with something that becomes permanent. We're not sure exactly how it will work.
And there's several things that we are doing, and I'm not talking for the Senate by no means, but from the House part, we did put working groups together. And the thing we were looking at the almost $2 billion worth of money in revolving funds, and we were looking at those, how is it being used? And so Senator Shaw, he did a bill that I ran for him on the House side that passed and the governor signed. It deals with from zero-based to performance-based budgeting, and the whole idea is probably as much as anything is it's sort of like going in and buying something and you lowball somebody and then they come and you keep negotiating back and forth before you decide. Is when this agent said, I need X amount of dollars, and we go, oh, okay, well, we're not going to be able to do that. Are they asking for more than what they actually need, or are they not? And so hopefully we need to refine that process just to make sure that the money that you're asking for is actually being used. And most people can show you, but we really need to know. And I think what we're going to see is more activity from the members, and members getting more power. And so we basically are able to put stuff under the microscope and get a better look and try to make sure that the dollars that are being used are actually being used in the best possible way. And that's what we all want. It's just that when you're 4 months out of the year, it makes it really difficult. And so I see us moving in a positive direction.
One of the interim studies I'm going to request to have issued the paperwork, and I'm pretty sure the Pro Tem will approve it, is to look at healthcare expenditures within the Department of Corrections. And as we studied the budget, and I am not in the Public Safety Sub-Appropriations Committee, that's an area that normally I wouldn't see. But because we did, as part of our additional budget hearings, the Department of Corrections, healthcare and healthcare funding is an area that I work in. And I noticed the amount of money we're spending within corrections on healthcare. And to look at those systems, is there a better, less expensive way to do the exact same thing so that we free up dollars in order to pay prison guards and things? We're not necessarily paying very expensive contracts for healthcare. Is there another way to do it? I think as the three of us serve throughout the course of our careers, those are things that we'll get better at and better and better as we move along.
No, and I think that's, somebody asked me earlier on, we've got this $611 million shortfall. Is there any positives that are going to come out of this? And I think really sitting back in both the House and the Senate has said, listen, the way we've been doing budgets for years is no longer working. We have to examine the way we do budgets. We have to examine off the top money. We have to examine how much of these fees are going into revolving funds. And so years like this are never fun. They're always hard, but I think a lot of positives going to come from a shortfall year like this.
Yeah, I thought it was during the State of the State when the governor was speaking.
The three of us that really rely on each other, and as long as our constituents don't expect us to be experts in everything, just know where to find that expert. If I have neighbors that are part of the juvenile justice system and making sure that we protect their rights. For a long time in Oklahoma, the juvenile justice system has been assumed to be purely rehabilitative, but with young people, any contact with the court will have an impact on the young person. So we're making sure that we're using the resources in juvenile justice appropriately, and it is a pleasure to work on something that involves that many people working towards the same goal to benefit Oklahoma's kids. And that one was a lot of fun. But I carry a lot, so it would take me, we'd need another show for me to talk about all my bills.
John.
Mine was probably a state question that's going to be on the ballot here next November. It'll be state question 777. It'll be the right to farm amendment. Basically what it'll do, it'll guarantee in the Oklahoma Constitution the right to continue to use modern farming practices and not be, for lack of a better word, influenced by outside influences like HSUS or PETA and things like that. I think it'll be a really big step in help protecting animal agriculture and crop agriculture here in the state of Oklahoma.
Good. Dennis.
Well, mine was probably naming that stretch of Highway 177 after Brian Hermanson. No, wait, you have to pass before that.
He has to pass away.
You're trying to tell me something, Dennis?
No, you know, actually, 630, which was a Senate bill from John Ford that deals with the Reading Sufficiency Act, probably the reason it's not the all means greatest thing in the world, but for me, there was so many things that happened behind the scenes to make this bill happen because I didn't have the right people on board that were going to support it. And as you know, last year that bill was the only thing the governor had her veto overwritten on the RSA, and that would sunset this year. And so we worked extremely hard of trying to put the bill together to give us a little more time, because we have seen some data that supports that the remediation of what we're doing is working. And for me, being from the education background, the one valuable thing I have, whether I'm coaching or whether I'm in the classroom, is the parental involvement. And I was really big on the parent group, and it was very, very passionate, and just felt like it really needs to continue. And we didn't get it. It still sunsets in 3 years, but I think that the data will support that we are moving in a good direction. The difference is this bill moves the team all the way down to first grade. So it's a crying shame if a child is not on grade level. I still just want to keep the parents involved in it. A lot of people say it doesn't make any difference, that we're just backing up, that if they're not on grade levels of third grade, or they stay in third grade. That is a big stick, and that's some tough love. But for me, if I can get the parents involved in first grade, second grade, and third grade, there's probably a pretty good chance that if that child's not on grade levels of third grade, there's a reason. And whether it be physical or mental, there's a reason. So that was very important to me.
When we started this many months ago, there seemed to be a lot of things that had happened with the education department at state level, and changes were being made. And tell me how you perceive that those changes have happened and occurred. Are things getting better?
I think things got much better. I really feel like we restored the authority on education back to the State Department of Education and local educators, and took some of that control out of the hands of the legislature. I know there was a move at one point when I first arrived in the Senate. There was a move to even talk about the Senate being responsible for educational standards, or the legislature being responsible. And I said, whoa. I think that sounds like a really terrible idea. And we realized that it's time to adjust and correct, and that putting educators involved in charge of education is pretty important, and we're moving in that direction. I hear a lot of positive comments from the teachers and the administrators that I interact with, and I do that on a regular basis. So we moved in the right direction this session.
And I definitely think, we've made education a huge priority this session. We haven't made big earth-changing moves, but I think that's okay, because we're taking our time, we're doing it slow, we're making sure what we're trying to do is the right thing. One of the biggest things I hear from educators a lot is, well, we're not going to buy into this program because the legislature is just going to change it 2 years or 3 years from now. And so we're really trying, like Representative Casey said, to study this stuff, get everybody on board, and as we move forward, make sure it's the direction we want to go as a state, and we don't have to backtrack or withdraw or change it in 2 years. And so I definitely think this session we've really made education a priority, and I think it's going to continue to be a priority as it should be.
50 cents per dollar actually goes into education, with Common Ed being more of the 34–32% range. It just seems so strange to me, because of all the agencies down there, we involve them on policy issues, except for education. I have seen a change with what AJ is saying and John both are saying is that what is it can we do, and then we can run the bill, instead of me saying this is what I'm going to do and see what you think. And so that aspect's good. The credibility of the State Department is high. That helps in working together. I think that our credibility with the educators is extremely low for a good reason. And sometimes educators' credibility with legislators is extremely low for a good reason. We're pretty blessed in our area, for me, District 35. We've got some excellent educators and excellent administrators, and we actually work together, and we're not doing the fighting and screaming and yelling and crying. We're actually, we're on the same team and working towards that, so that makes it really nice. It is an extremely frustrating aspect because we all have the same goal. We just, for whatever reason, we have a tendency to really load up the mandates. And the way I give an example is, you know, if you looked at the school law book and the mandates, you know, it's about this tall. And, you know, we're supposedly somewhere in the 40 percentiles, mid-40s, as far as how we do within education. And then if you look at the Department of Career Tech, we legislate, it's about this thick, and they're #1 in the nation. I look at it as if we don't like the way things are going in Common Ed, who's at fault? We're the ones who set the rules, we're the ones who set everything up. And then we complain because you don't get it done, and then we change it when you do get it figured out. So that's an aspect. I do think with the different groups of people that came in and the ideas and thoughts, we're moving in a very positive direction. It just doesn't turn on a dime. I wish it could.
There are always things in the legislative session that are frustrating. Bills that you would have liked to see passed that didn't. Things that you'd like to see accomplished but couldn't get a majority on board with you. Why don't we talk about some of those and if you think any of them will have any success in the future?
I've got several bills that are sitting dormant that may be dormant this time next year as well, a couple of big ones. But we just start a conversation. Just even looking at smoking and the cause of the growth of the healthcare cost in this country. Brian, did you know if we reduced the number of Oklahomans that smoked by 10%, it would save us an average of $350 million a year. Just moving that bar just a little bit. So that's something we will look at. How do we incentivize businesses to be healthier? How do we set up systems and I proposed something that would have allowed the people to vote if we were going to go smoke-free in all indoor places. We'll try that again, but I'm also going to complement that with some fee reductions for businesses that are smoke-free and try a different way to accomplish that same goal. So no filed legislation is ever useless if it starts a conversation, and we've still got a lot of work to do.
I think that's definitely true. And nothing's ever dead 100% in the legislature. It always, even even if it seems like the worst idea ever, somebody always seems to bring it back a year or two later. But like the senator said, as long as you can get, and several people, you know, will file legislation that they know, you know, maybe won't get passed just to start the conversation and carry that into interim studies and things like that. And a lot of times, as long as you can get the dialogue started, that's the important part. Texting and driving, which we got passed this year, is a perfect example. It was a really long, drawn-out process. Bills have been filed for years and years and years, and finally enough people got together and talked about it and realized the tragedy that was going along with this not being in the law, and it finally got passed this year. It's just sometimes it's a slow, frustrating process.
Dennis, anything?
Just one thing. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get anywhere on the testing. We're going to get there for next year. Quite honestly, there was a lot of work and a lot of meetings, and a lot of time went into that. And my whole take on the whole thing is to say, look, if we get the standards done, we want to make sure that whatever we do testing is going to be correlate with whatever types of testing is. So I think we'll see some relief after this year within the testing. I mean, we obviously test way too much and not doing enough with the data. A bill that I'm looking at for next year, because you know, one of the pleasures that we have, if you get a chance, you can ride with one of the troopers, and riding with the troopers here within the area, you know, the tickets are outrageously high, and you know, the troopers are just like us. They're human beings, and when they got to go up and write somebody a $250